Live from the 607, it's the Ocho Duro Parlay Hour, where we're talking everything movies, TV, comics, and entertainment. Join in the conversation on social media with the hashtag ODPH, because here we go. Welcome to a special edition of the ODPH podcast, better known as the Ocho Duro Parlay Hour. What's happening, everybody? Ken M in the studio, and we have a special guest on the line because we're doing a comic deep dive that you usually find only on our Patreon, but we're going to send this one out to the masses because it's a fantastic comic, and we have a fantastic guest that wants to come in and talk about it. You know him as one of the hosts of the Panel2Panel podcast, which if you're not following, you're not sub to, I'm going to tell you right now, make sure you do it by the end of this episode because it's one of the best comic podcasts out on the planet. Please welcome to the ODPH, the one and only Marty from the Panel2Panel podcast. Marty, what's going on?
Hey, hi, howdy. What's going on? Really appreciate you giving me the opportunity to talk. It's going to be great.
Oh, absolutely. Anytime we can talk comics on the ODPH, you know we will make time to do it. And like I say, we usually do these special reviews strictly for Patreon, but this one we're releasing to the masses because we definitely want to make sure everybody is aware of this fantastic comic that has been out, generating a lot of buzz amongst the independent podcast community. But before we get into it, why don't you let our listeners know a little bit more about the Panel2Panel podcast and everything you're up to?
Yeah, sure. So Panel2Panel podcast is a podcast where we talk all things comics. It's hosted by myself, Bash and Ali, and Bash and Ali also are a part of the Radiant Black podcast as well as the Firepower podcast. And they have a wealth of knowledge, and I've come in as kind of the new reader take on things. And between the three of us, we have a really good conversation around tribal knowledge versus looking at things from a new reader's perspective. I've been in comics now reading heavily for the past almost 3 years now. So I've got a little bit of that, but there's still a lot of stuff that, I ask questions about. We talk about things, everything from grading to collecting. We have a lot of guests on where people are either have Kickstarters or we're going to have some potentially artists and other folks coming up where we get questions from the readers. We're able to ask them for them and get some takes and understand how things work from a creative perspective as well. So it's a little bit of a mixed bag, but we talk everything comics. Sometimes we'll talk about movies that are coming up as it relates to the comics. We've done episodes on Black Adam and the Moon Knight, where we've done kind of how to get ready for it. Here's a reading guide that we followed and kind of our predictions and stuff like that.
Yes, it's excellent. So you definitely want to make sure you're checking it out. All that information is in the liner notes of this podcast. And when Marty and I were kind of kicking around ideas of what to talk about, he brought up a book that, like I said, has been generating a lot of buzz, and rightfully so, amongst the independent podcast community. Comics podcasts are talking about this all over the place. And Marty, what is that book?
That book is the Do A POWERBOMB by Daniel Warren Johnson. And it was kind of funny because I think on one of the very first threads that you put us in, where you do that follow for follow in picture, I posted a picture of you guys in the picture, except with one of the panels. So that's kind of started it. And I know you guys are huge wrestling fans, and I ended up getting into this book late, but it's definitely awesome.
Yeah, I definitely got into this, and I was like, this is right up our alley, because I would see the memes going around, and obviously Daniel Warren Johnson is doing phenomenal work left and right. I was a big fan of his Beta Ray Bill, so when I heard that he was doing wrestling, I'm like, take my money now. This is a no-brainer for me. And now diving into the limited series, because unfortunately it's been announced issue 7 is where this is going to be ending, and we're going to be talking about issues 1 through 5. There's been a lot that is going on with this book that definitely captures a lot that if you're into pro wrestling like I am, or just kind of on the fringe like Marty is, there's something for everybody, but the story is what's driving everything here. Like, wouldn't you say, Marty?
Yeah, definitely. Daniel Warren Johnson's really a triple threat because he does it all. He writes, he does the letters, he does the coloring, and he draws it. And like you, I also read Beta Ray Bill before this. That was the first book that I got introduced to his stuff, and it was really interesting because when I first read Beta Ray Bill, just the art and the colors and the lettering kind of threw me for a bit because it's not like the standard norm of comics that you get. It's very different, and it took me maybe about a couple pages to get into it. And then after that, I was just hooked on his approach and how he did everything, which was great. And from a new reader perspective, Beta Ray Bill was great because it was a self-contained story. This, again, is great because it's a self-contained story and it has a little bit of everything for everybody. And the way that he writes, he really plays with themes that kind of really hit you in different ways depending upon, you know, where you are in life. And there's really something for everybody, which allows the readers to really truly connect to the story.
Absolutely. No, there's a lot going on with this book, and there's so many underlying themes that are happening here. It really transcends wrestling, even though that's what it's all centered about, and they do a great job doing it. And especially once I heard that Daniel Warren Johnson was doing this, there's a panel that's in Beta Ray Bill where you see Beta Ray is giving somebody the Rainmaker clothesline from Kensuke Okada, and it is phenomenal. And I marked out when I saw it. I know JVD from Crossover Collision, Villains the Man, definitely chimed in about that. And I was like, oh my God, that is so cool to see him do it. And he acknowledged, obviously, he's very influenced by New Japan Pro Wrestling, which, if you haven't checked out, you need to check out. So that said, we're going to do our usual spoiler-free statement that you hear on the ODPH. So we're going to give you enough time to really kind of get a general idea what we're going to do. And then after a countdown, it is spoiler talk time, and we're going to break down everything and anything that is going on with the series thus far. So, Marty, why don't you give our listeners the spoiler-free statement about Do A Powerbomb?
Sure. So like I said, this is one book that I really didn't jump into, but I saw a ton of people talking about it and singing its praises, like Ken said. I didn't jump in till about issue 3, and then I'm glad I did, because the book hooked me right from the first issue. I was never a huge wrestling fan growing up, but this book has a ton to offer from non-wrestling fans. Things like life, loss, high stakes, and of course, a magical aspect, which is really cool. The colors and lettering in this book were amazing and really enhanced this story. There are times where the letters do such a great job. They help show motion during some of the wrestling moves. And then for the cloud, the huge words that are like over the crowd, it just kind of makes you feel like you're immersed within the book. And I found myself at times imagining being kind of in that crowd with all of the chanting with the epic letter art. So that was some of the things that really hit for me. And then I'll definitely go into some stuff that hit pretty hard for me as we dig into it from a spoilers perspective.
Yeah, I have to echo that statement too, that there is just so much that is going on here, and it's just the little details like you touched upon, from the letter wording to just those moments where it really jumps out from the panel, and you can sit there reading it and really feel that energy that's coming out from here, that it's not just a wrestling story. And then even if you are not into pro wrestling, by the time you get to, I would say, about issue 3, you're locked in, and you're like, oh my God, the stakes are here, the emotion, which you're going to definitely feel from the characters, you can fully relate to, and you really see that drive, and you can definitely, see the hearts breaking when they happen, and just, the ranges that every character is going through, and all balanced out by the supernatural background, which definitely, you don't think on paper this might work, but yet when you see the panels right here, wherever you're reading it, you're going, oh my God, this is a fantastic read. And I just sit there a lot of times and going, for a wrestling fan, it's paying perfect homage to it. You definitely capture the theatrical aspect of it and the physicality, and it's just put together in such a mind-blowing way. You can't help but be hooked on it. And I know there's only 2 issues left. I wish they did an ongoing. Maybe we'll get a prequel. I'm just putting that karma out in the world, because this has been an excellent read thus far. So you definitely want to make sure you're hitting up your LCS or Comixology and make sure you get this in your collection. It's a fantastic book out right now from Image Comics. That being said,
would be awesome.
Oh, I would say, yeah. No, oh my God, the prequel. If they did a prequel, I think that's the only direction they should go and need to go in, because I want to see more, like, of the background and the story of a few certain characters. But we'll get into that when we get into the spoiler talk. And that being said, in 3, 2, 1, it's spoiler time. Marty, talk to me about this book.
My God, this. Let's start with like the first issue, which really drew me into this. So like I'm a dad. I've got 2 young girls of 8 and 2, and the very first issue. Obviously, we're in spoilers, right?
Yes.
Steel Rose dies right in the beginning. It's just like she looks like a main character, and then she's killed off, and like. And the point where right before she expires, they kind of cut to where she's laying in bed with her daughter, and just like her daughter's asking like, oh, where do we go in the afterlife? And she, the mother's like explaining the concept of dying and like, well, I really don't know. Maybe we go somewhere. And that just concept, right at the end, she's like, but don't worry, I'm going to be here for a long time. And then all of a sudden, the dad comes out and is like, sorry, she's gone. And that for me, like that just gut punch wrenched me right in the stomach, because like, every night I'll read to my kids in bed, and sometimes we'll lay in bed and we'll talk about stuff together. And like, just thinking about that, life's short, man. It just crushed me. It almost brought a tear to my eye. And from then on out, I was like, God, these stakes of this book are super high, especially when, at the very end of that first issue, you find out more and learn about the tournament that's going on with the necroman, what's his name? Willard, who is the necromancer. And he's like, hey, I have this tournament where you can bring your mom back to life. So like, that's how kind of the first issue ends, and it hooks you. It's like, all right, we're going to take the main character away, but hey, there's a potential of her coming back. And right then and there, I was ready to go.
Oh, especially too when they start off, because you see you as Steel Rose, and she's addressing the crowd, and like typically before any type of main event is going on, so you're kind of seeing the crowd is getting wound up, and you see her family comes to see her backstage, and they have that heartwarming interaction, and you see how her young daughter is just looking up to her. And, she's like, okay, we'll be fine. Like, and getting ready to go into the ring. And she cuts that amazing promo. Like, I'm doing this for my family. I'm not doing this for me, which you hear a lot of times from pro wrestling. So, like, I love how Johnson got this right to the letter. Like, this felt like I was watching Monday Night Raw or Friday Night SmackDown. Like, this just was perfect. And then,
yeah, I was just saying, not only that, but like the stakes when you knew it was staged, where where Cobra's son kind of slipped on the top rope there, and that's what caused the fall of the mother snapping her neck basically. And he knew he messed up, and the worst part about it is like he was really trying to help her.
Yeah,
because he's the heel of that whole fight.
Wrestling, we always say is such a dangerous field to be in too, because one accidental mess and you can have anything from paralysis to death, and it's such a you have to really just admire when you watch the pro wrestlers now and you see on WWE or AEW and what such, like the ones that are really well at their craft, how intricate their timing has to be. Otherwise, when these type of accidents happen, they have real life-changing consequences. And we see Cobra Sun is trying to set up for what appears to be like a Styles Clash off the second rope. If you're into wrestling, you know what it is. It kind of looks like a pile driver to anybody that's a non-wrestler, and Cobra Sun loses his footing, and you see Steel Rose come right down on her neck and breaks it instantly. Like, that is just one moment you're just in like, oh my God, like what just happened? And you see that, yeah, he does break character because obviously he's very concerned about what happens. And then you go right to that scene in the hospital. Her husband comes out and just goes like, yeah, she's passed. And like, how do you deal with that? And then you go 10 years later where the daughter is now stepping into that role. Like, when you're seeing this unfold, what's going through your mind, Marty?
Well, what's even crazier is that, she's trying to follow in her mother's footsteps, but you have Uncle Blood, who basically, he was like paying her that money for to do that some match, but Lona is like, which is the daughter's name. Lona wants to go to the big leagues, but he's like, no, I can't train you because of what happened to your mom. And he basically tells her right out. So right there's some family drama involved in everything that's gone on. So like, it just sets the stakes where that Lona is fighting an uphill battle with the people that really care about her. And so she has that to overcome. And then she finds out on top of it, like, there's this tournament that maybe she can get her mom back. So then she has that. So she has like two main things to overcome to try to get what she wants. And I mean, for anybody, this really hits hard because somebody, at this point in this stage in the game, most people have lost something that they wanted to get back. And if there's an opportunity to get it back by some way of magical form, like, let's go on that adventure and try to figure it out. So I feel like this speaks to a lot of people, both family, just loss in general, and then the whole, magical aspect of it, which again are like all the things that really, really hooked me from the first issue, because I gave the first issue a shot, and at the end I was like, all right, I need this. Like, here's my money. I'm in for the long haul.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Because like I say, once you see Willard Nectron appear with his Death Life Pro Wrestling Castle ring, like, I mean, this kind of goes completely over the top. But when he offers the deal of, I can bring your mother back, how insane is that moment for Lona? That now is like the biggest, tragedy in her life can now be reversed. And obviously she's going in with this thinking like one goal, like I'm going to get my mom back. So, I mean, just how much that impacts the story moving forward. I mean, Marty, that's just like the tip of the iceberg though, right?
Oh yeah. I mean, what's crazy, first of all, the design of Willard, I love it. I love the spiked hair. I love the coat. Coat's sick. I mean, he's like the devil, but he's like this badass wrestling guy like that. I mean, again, I don't follow wrestling, but he looks like he could wrestle, and you learn a lot about like his backstory in that second issue where he talks about, how he tried to conquer the world essentially and got fought in a big war, and then they just exiled him to where he is now, and he got bored, but he loves pro wrestling. But what's really crazy to me is that he doesn't realize wrestling is fake.
Yes.
Him and Lona have this exchange where she's like, but pro wrestling, it's scripted, it's predetermined outcome, and he's like, ha ha ha, good one, you're full of shit. Like, now here, I'm going to show you more about this death tournament that you're in. And what's really interesting is this is the tag team tournament, but like, she's like, well, who am I going to fight with? And he was the one that suggests Cobra Sun. And this is to, after reading it when I read it through the first time, I didn't really think anything of it, but reading through this again on the reread, I was like, oh man, there's so much foreshadowing here on so many different levels. Because first of all, Cobra Sun was the dude that killed the mother.
Right.
We don't know who's behind Cobra Sun's mask yet, but like right after that panel, right, Lona gets a call from her dad, and she declines it, and then Cobra Sun goes into this main battle with this other wrestler in a no hold bars match and gets his ass whooped, and then takes a payday. But like at the end of that issue, you find out the big reveal: Cobra Sun is actually Lona's dad. So this now adds a whole nother level to the stakes, and because Lona doesn't know that her dad actually killed her mom, which is nuts. On top of it, like, there's loss, regret, like there's so much I'm sure going through his head. And I mean, Cobra Sun's name is Jacob. And we learn that in issue 3 where him and Uncle Blood are arguing about not training or not being able to train Lona, thank you, because he's like, she's got raw talent just like her mother, like you got to do it. Because Lona, I think, went to talk to Cobra Sun to try to get him to do it, to be a part of the tournament. And he was, at first he's like, no, hell no, not happening, like, you're no way.
Well, yeah, because he doesn't want to go through the same tragedy again, because I mean, obviously this is a whole different ball game than the normal pro wrestling world.
And what's crazy is, what do you think about that exchange where Lona was trying to persuade Cobra Sun to work for her?
I think that I thought it was done very, very deceptively, which I like, because obviously when you realize who Cobra Sun truly is, like, you're seeing he's just trying to brush off and being very professional about it in the landscape of pro wrestling. But like, once you get that reveal, you're like, oh my god, because you fully understand, like, it's not that she's not good enough to be a pro wrestler. It's, I don't want to see my daughter die, because where we're going to go with this, you see now Cobra Sun is now dealing with deathmatch wrestling, which is a whole different ballgame in the landscape of pro wrestling. But you're now seeing it like he's dabbling in this because he has so much loathing upon himself. Like, it's such a weird thing to see play out, but it makes sense. And then obviously when they get paired together in the tournament, and you're seeing that obviously, we're talking with the uncle too, it's like we're trying to keep her safe, but she's hell-bent in high water to go get her mother back, which you can fully relate to and understand. But it's like nobody truly understands what's going on here. You have a crazy necromancer running around promising everybody anything to be a part of this weird tournament. Like, just seeing how this is all like folding out. Like, you're sitting there as a reader going, I understand the motivations and I can fully get behind this, but do you really understand what you're going into? Like, there's got to be a catch. And then, like, once you get to issue 3 and you see the welcome to the death life, like, that whole scene.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, talk to me about this one, Marty.
Oh my God. Yeah. Yeah. Real quick. Cause I was going to talk a little bit about that. So you crushed it. We're thinking the same thing there. But what's crazy is when he decides to go and be partners with Lona, she basically tells him, I'm doing this with or without you. So it's like the reader knows that that's really Lona's dad. Lona doesn't know that yet. And the father is just like, well, shit, I guess the only way to protect my daughter is to do this thing with her and hope for the best. Like as a parent, you try to foster, and keep your kid under your wing as best as you can, as long as you can, and as much as you can. But there's a point where they're going to be like, screw it, I'm doing it anyways. And you got to try to have that safety net. And this is like, his way of having that safety net. So I thought that was crazy. Like just a extra level and layer of family aspect that's really happening behind the scenes with this whole wrestling thing, which again, for me is what drew, like, another reason why I was so connected to this book. But this panel that you're talking about where they get into Welcome to the Deathlight, the first thing that I thought of was 2 movies, right? Or was 2 things. Was Ready Player One, because their portals are opening up and they're going in and they're getting ready to register for this tournament. And the other thing, obviously, right, Avengers.
Yep.
The big battle at the end, for Endgame, where everyone was going through the portal. I was like, oh man, it's just like these 2 things go all over again. But it looks like a giant festival. Like the archway with the DLP with the skull is just like epic. It's just like you look like you're going into hell and into death. The colors really pop, and I really love the effect with the portal, again with the lettering. It's like I can't even pronounce it, but it really just makes you feel like people are entering into this thing, which was really, really cool.
Yeah, exactly. Because then you start seeing some of the other tag teams come there, and they are running into the first one on the docket, and that is FYSO, which is which I gotta admit, I laughed out loud when I realized what their tag team name really stood for. F your stupid opinions. Like, how brilliant is that? And then they go to the puppy dog, which they're like, why are you punching a dog? Like, just randomly.
Oh my God.
Just like, this is how crazy this scene is, because you're trying to see the Cobra Sun and Lona are just trying to go, to the bar and just kind of just like relax a little bit, because obviously they know what they're stepping into. This is going to be literal hell. And then you see this just completely random tag team is threatening this puppy, ready to punch him. And then Lona's like, who the hell thinks about punching a puppy? And then this causes a little bit of a brawl that happens, which I love this scene because it just gets completely out of control. And then you get introduced to one of the wildest tag teams I think I've seen. Because we have to remember, this is not just your normal pro wrestling. This is supernatural. You're seeing aliens. You're seeing all types of different stuff. You see Orangabang show up.
Yep.
How was your reaction seeing them?
So, I mean, you hit the nail on the head where it's just like anything goes, no hold bars. Like, this is really wrestling all over the universe or globe or wherever, because these 2 massive orangutan guys, where they basically like step in and stop the fight from happening because of the reason, they don't want their opponents, because they're the people that they get paired with first, and they want to make sure that their opponents are top notch for fighting against them, and they feel that it's unfair if they were getting their ass whooped. So like, it just very, very nice group of a tag team that wants to make sure that their opponents are in tip top shape. Anybody else that was sleazy would be like, screw it, I'm just going to let them get their ass kicked, and then I'll just kick their ass real easy. And these guys are like, nope, they step in and just smack the shit out of them.
Yeah.
And say, hey, listen, we're fighting you first. We want to make sure you're good. You're a legit contender, which I thought was awesome.
It's such a pro wrestling move too. Like, it's so perfect. Like, I can't stress this enough, because the one thing that we've talked about on 607 TWS with Rich from 3FN and myself is, when you watch pro wrestling for the first time, or you read it for the first time, you should know who the good guys are and the bad guys are within the first couple minutes. you obviously know FYOS is absolutely awful. They're completely scumbag human beings. And Orangabang is actually good guys that are trying to do the right thing. So it's that little nod to the real landscape of pro wrestling. I love seeing this. Like, for me, I was like, okay, now I get this. And especially being an old school pro wrestling fan, like, this is right up my alley.
Yeah, it was really good to see that established right off the get-go. It made it real easy to track to for a non-wrestling or someone that's not into wrestling at all. And one thing I liked about the way that this story developed is we learned a lot about what the stakes were, what everybody's stakes were in the game for this huge major fight. Because before every event, we learned, why Orangabang was a part of this competition. They lost one of their brothers, I think it was, and same with everybody else, which I thought was great because you knew like everybody's stakes were equally as high for this whole thing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's just that little personal touch. Like, they were trying to get it was actually their sister. They were trying to get back, and but that's like the little thing that gives just this completely insane pro wrestling tournament some emotional layers, which it's kind of crazy to think about. But yet Warren Johnson, he nails this perfectly and really captures it, because obviously you have the team of Sun and Steel. That is Cobra Sun and Lona. And then they start breaking down the different brackets. And I love how they kind of just combine a little bit from each kind of pro wrestling style. The Lucha Bots are in there too, which, I mean, obviously Lucha Libre, he's a big fan of too as well. And you start seeing just some of the tourney is set up and just how the Necromancers just living this in. And then when you get to the first match too, the stakes are high between both Orangabang and Sun and Steel, and seeing the action go here. And really just how they do the lettering for this. This is something that jumped out to me. I don't know about you, but when you see that first punch that the one member of Orangabang lands on Cobra Sun and you see him getting flipped, to a 360, you can just feel that reading at home going holy crap, right?
Yeah, it's crazy. And again, with the lettering, and here's where it's really interesting, because as this story develops, Cobra Sun is being the protective father in him and not letting Lona do anything in the beginning, and he's getting the shit kicked out of him. And Lona's sitting there on the sidelines what the F, let me in, tag me in, and he won't do it. And what's really interesting about this tournament is one of the rules that they have where you can interrupt for any moment and not have a tag. So in order for this first match, in order for them to actually will end up being victorious, is Lona just jumps in and stops her father, or that she didn't know about, but Cobra Sun from getting pinned essentially. And she does this crazy layback, I don't know what the
moonsault
heck it's called. Yeah. And the lettering is this is where the lettering comes in, where it's just what? And you could hear the crowd just in the background, all in big crazy pink letters, and that's where it just jumps out at you right before she pins the Orangabangs, which I thought was awesome. But you slowly start to see the training wheels come off, or that safety net go away, when the father is realizing, hey, I gotta let my daughter just kind of free a bit, and I gotta stop being overprotective, and we have to actually work together as a team, which I thought from a family dynamic perspective was huge, because every parent goes through this where they got to let their kid off the leash. They got to take the training wheels off. The kid's got to be able to function on its own, on his own or her own. And just that whole concept interplayed throughout these next few issues with the matches was just mind boggling. It really hit home for me.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. Like I say, just that extra emotional feel to this story, just not that it was even necessary, but man, you just really connect with it, and you're going you can't help but root for Sun and Steel to win this tournament, even though we do see a quick shot of Pizza Party versus the Knights of Rain, and just how insane that match gets. And obviously there is a lot of AEW, or I should say FTR influence here, that you see their finisher being used, and this was just a wild scene, don't you think?
Oh my God, yeah. And this is really, again, where the letters and everything really convey movement, and just it just makes you feel so immersed with what's going on. And I love how the whole pizza finisher, like you see a big pizza pie
Yeah.
when he does the kick as he's slicing it. Like, this is the most crazy tag team. I mean, they get the crap kicked out of them, but like, even to the point where like the letters where one of the guys is hopping over the ropes where it's like boang, you can really get into that. And again, it's like the way that they're written, it conveys the motion of him kind of jumping over the top. And it's just like, between the art and the lettering and colors and everything and how it's written, it just comes together so well that when I was reading through these fight scenes, like I ripped through them so quick, and then I had to go back and I wanted to look at all the details, because it makes you like want to continue and want to force yourself to read more, which is one of the things that I think makes this comic so immersive.
Oh yeah, no, I completely agree. Like the minute I started doing it, I just kept buzzing through every single issue. And then like even when you start getting the backstory of all the tag teams, like the Knights of Rain, you find out that, for as being as badass as they are, there's an actual reason that they're like this, because they're trying to stop the necromancer by any means they can, because they know what the true potential is. So it's like, you don't want to see them win, but now you kind of have to root for them a little bit. Like, and this is so Pro Wrestling 101 too. Like when you know the heels are not really heels, they're faces, but you have to, like circumstances are causing that you have to root for them. Like, I mean, this just played right in my wheelbarrow. I don't know about you.
Yeah, it just added another layer. Like, this thing it's like an onion. We're peeling back the layers issue by issue, and there's just more to it. And that's what, you look at this comic at the surface and you're just like, oh, well, this is just, it's going to be a okay comic, a decent comic. It's got wrestling, it looks fun, but like there's so many things that are interlayered and intertwined that it makes it really interesting to read, and it really makes you feel for it. And those are the stories, that kudos to the writing and art that really just drive it home.
Yeah, no, I completely agree, because like I say, they do a lot of great homages to some of the great tag teams in the business. They do a Doomsday Device, which if you know the Legion of Doom or the Road Warriors, obviously that was their finish for a long time, and do like little tweaks here and there. And then we do get like a little break in the action that you see Lona is training with Cobra Sun and really trying to get going. And I love how they just do another montage. Like,
yes,
just perfect played into that well. Because, I mean, it does kind of start getting that Rocky IV kind of vibe going on for this. And I love how they set this up, because especially they have to face the Knights of Rain coming up, and this is the big match.
Yep. Yeah, I really love the montage too. That was one of the coolest things ever that happened. And honestly, when I first read this, like they were like, I love how we get in that montage, we get some more backstory of how Cobra Sun and Steel Rose were a tag team before he turned to heel. And this is where like my lack of knowledge came into play. And we were talking about this before we started the recording. It's like I had to Google what a heel was, because I was like, what the hell is this? And I had to. So for folks that don't know, it's basically someone that's a villain or bad guy that breaks the rules and gives the good guy someone to go after.
Yes.
So for that, like knowing that, I was like, okay, that's kind of cool. And this is where like I think we could potentially get, if after the 7 issues, we were talking about this earlier, is potentially a prequel of how they got, how Cobra Sun and Rose were a tag team and how they got involved with each other and all that stuff. So I think that was cool. I really liked how this is where the tides are turning and the wheels are coming off from a training wheels perspective. And the father really recognizes the fact that in order for us to win, we just have to start working together. And he talks about tandem moves, and then they start to work together as a team, even though Lona, again, still doesn't know that it's the father behind the mask. And he's, starting to stop protecting himself. And here's where, right after they get into it, like Lona goes first. She gets the crap kicked out of her, but then ends up, trusting Cobra Sun, tagging him in, and they work together to win the match, and they create this really cool finisher move. And And then after that match, right, we get another entry. And what'd you think about when Kuro Pack came in from Japan, and who we found out the reveal of one of the guys was in that tag team? Like, what were your thoughts on that?
I was blown away. I was like, I knew the uncle was going to be appearing somewhere. I just didn't predict it was going to be here when you see Puro Pack. But yeah, you do see Uncle Blood show up, and now he takes the mask off right in front of Lona too. And that moment, he's trying to hold back the tears of just like, this was my plan, like she was my sister, this is my fight, what are you doing here, you've screwed everything up. And knowing that they're going to have to go to battle now, it turns into just this absolute insane dance going on, and you're seeing that the uncle's team is just not hanging in there, and they're just absolutely getting just destroyed. And you're seeing that he gets actually put into an MMA style move, the rear naked chokehold. I know that sometimes you could say it's a Taz mission too for pro wrestling circumstances. And you're seeing just the uncle is not wanting to tap out under any circumstances, and he winds up just passing out. And you do see that when this is going on, obviously FYSO is not letting go of the hold, and they have to come in and make the save on him too. And you see the uncle, though, is going to make it through, but he is left with a broken neck. Like, when you're seeing this kind of plays back into the pro wrestling element where you see somebody get injured, and then the team is now rallying around that injury to come over, just the insane odds against them. Like, being on not as much of a wrestling fan, when you're seeing this unfold, like, what is going through your head about this?
Well, the worst part about it is these guys are complete scumbags, like you were saying before. Like, the bell dings, and the guys, one of the guys was like, nah, and Necromancer's like, these guys won't let go of the hold. And all of a sudden, like, one of the guys gets on the top ropes and he's like, let's teach these guys a lesson. And he comes down and with his leg down right on the neck, and you see that snap, and you're like, and the crowd goes gasp. And here's again where the letters really play into this and kind of gut punch you. And then there's a big brawl that happens. But like, it just really goes to show you how much of scumbags these guys are. And these guys are out to, they are the true heel of this whole match or this whole tournament. And it's like, Jesus, we just need to kick these guys' asses because they're the worst. And it really makes you root against them, especially when, Uncle Blood is laying in that bed afterwards. And he's like, well, he's got a broken neck. He's lucky to be alive right now. And this is really where the stakes go up another level, where they're talking to Necro, and they're like, well, he wants a bloodbath, let's give him a bloodbath. And this issue really ends with Cobra Sun pulling out a freaking bat with barbed wire around it, and again, here's where like the theme of we're not real wrestling in the US here. They don't believe in real wrestling, and he's like, well, let's show them how real we can get. And he's got the bat over his shoulder, and the stakes are then set even higher, where they're gonna go fucking crazy and just go nuts because he's got a chair with barbed wire in his hand. Like, what were your thoughts when you saw that before we get into the the last issue that we're gonna talk about? What were your thoughts? It just escalated.
I'm not going to lie. Like, when you saw the Necromancer was not disqualifying FYSO from the tournament, I was like, this is going to go into a steel cage. Like, that was my instinct. Like, okay, he's going to have some kind of weird steel cage going. And then when I saw Cobra Sun mess with the bag, I legit was like, okay, I see a bat. Like, tell me we're going to be doing a death match without doing a death match. And then when they do the full panel shot of Cobra Sun walking with light tubes, kendo sticks, and that chair wrapped in barbed wire, I marked out, because I watch a ton of GCW Game Changer Wrestling, which has a lot of deathmatch wrestling in it. And I will say this, if you've never watched a deathmatch before, it's an acquired style of wrestling. Like, it's not for everybody, to say the least. But when I saw this, I'm like, oh my God, he's going to try doing a deathmatch here, just to see like how this would translate to the story. Because like, you have to remember, there's supernatural elements going on here. There is a great emotional story, and yet I see the light tubes come out. And I'm going, we're having light tubes. This is going to be absolutely freaking nuts. I don't know how this plays out, but I could not wait to start reading issue 5. Like, honestly, and I know this is the last issue we're going to be talking about. I completely marked out like a madman because this is GCW 101 for me. So when this match is getting ready to go, and obviously they open issue 5 where he's like, yeah, I want a no disqualification, barbed wire, ladder, false count anywhere, death match. And you see FYSO is like, no way. Nope, not happening. And they get forced into it. It was perfect. Like, I completely marked out for this. And then there was even the little subtle nod. Like, if you weren't sure that Johnson was influenced by GCW, the shirt that Lona has on here in issue 5, the black with red lettering, that is GCW. I don't know if you picked up on that or not.
No, because that's really cool to know though, because I didn't catch that at all. But that's super cool that there's those subtle little Easter eggs in there.
Yeah,
which is always good for fans of wrestling and that know wrestling like yourself. Like you're just like, oh, not only are the stakes this high and we're going crazy at death match, but look at this. I'm going to give you this little nod to wrestling here and there as well, which is awesome.
Yeah. And then when they get that final match going, it's absolutely as insane as you think. Cobra Sun comes flying out of the corner, gives a big boot to one of FYSO. You see the chairs getting thrown in. Like, they're not holding back. And this is typically what you would see if you're watching pro wrestling. This is more like an SGC versus Briscoes type match. Like, this is kind of like the normal high pace, high action. We're not taking a lot of time off here. We're just going to go out there and beat the absolute shit out of each other for 20 minutes, which I am here for every day and all day. Like I say, acquired taste, but it does work for me. And you're just seeing just how high stakes this is. You're seeing big impact moves going on. You're seeing a lot of wrestlers jumping out of the cage and then, or out of the ring. And then you see Cobra Sun do a dive over the top rope and hit everybody into the barbed wire that is, like, this is where I couldn't really tell if they had barbed wire around the gates where the fans were sitting, or if that was just kind of the shadow of everything here, where you see the whoa, and he jumps on and he crashes everybody into the barricade. Like, how amazing was this?
Yeah, it's crazy. And this is like kudos to the art and the letters here, because this is really where it hits home with how motion is portrayed, both in the lettering and in the art, because you have those lines that are coming in, like when one of the guys gets tackled out of the ring, it's just like boom, and the boom is like kind of it's kind of like somebody took I don't know,
it's like a shotgun blast,
something, yeah, like a shotgun blast, and it's not straight lettering, it's got squiggles in it, and just the whoa and the motion, the line motions really just made you immersed in everything that was going on, because literally every single panel was just like constant motion, constant beating up each other. And then, as soon you see that there's no holding back here, because Cobra Sun gets punched right in the nuts.
Yep.
Like such a low blow. And then, right after that, you see Lona climbing this massive ladder, and those ladders are always like the big event in any of these things. And I mean, I even know that, and I don't watch wrestling, but what did you think was going to happen as she was starting to climb that ladder there?
See, I had a feeling that with a ladder that big, he was going to try going Jeff Hardy. And what I mean by this is, if you've never seen Jeff Hardy wrestle in the WWE days, like early on in his career, he would climb to the tallest ladders you could throw at him and do what they call a swanton bomb, where he'd like flip himself, and like he'd almost go as like a nosedive, and then turn his body so he'd hit his back on the opponent right before the end. And I'm going, oh, he's going to try going swanton here. He's going Jeff Hardy. And sure enough, Johnson plays into that. So I'm going like, all right, this is going to be absolutely insane, but this makes sense because you see obviously the member of FYSO is on the table, and this is just a complete perfect Hardy Boys homage. That obviously, I know you're not familiar with them, Marty, they were one of the pioneers of doing the tables, ladders, and chairs match in WWE with Edge and Christian and the Dudley Boys, and they would do some of the most insane crap that you have ever seen a physical body get put through, and it was almost like the precursor for hardcore matches. And I don't want to say death matches to a degree, because that's like the death match thing is a whole different ball of wax, like to put it mildly. But they were the ones that just used to do these high spots, and you see how the crowd would freak out, and especially like with the yellow lettering that Johnson uses here, that is perfect Jeff Hardy jumping off a ladder. And we see Lona is the one doing it here. She puts herself through the table along with FYSO, and just this is where things just really start getting crazy, because somebody gets a chain out and they start using it like a lariat. Like, what's going through your mind watching this?
Oh my God. Like, first of all, the fact that they played up that whole, like, she kind of fell off the ladder, but still managed to do what they called a sentient bomb, which I thought was awesome. And then they ripped out the chains, and it was just like, oh God, like someone's going to get their head literally like pulled right off. And that's the first thing that I thought of was, oh my God, like someone's going to die. And we've seen what he's already done with characters where he's broken characters, like main characters' necks. He's killed people right off the bat. And I was like, for the love of God, I really hope like Cobra Sun's head doesn't roll off and his mask comes off. And all of a sudden, like Lona realizes now she's lost her dad too in this whole thing, because things were not looking good for these guys at all at this point in time, especially when the chains came out, and then it got really crazy because tacks come out.
Yeah, this is
crushed. This is where it's getting like real bloody, and chairs and everything.
Yeah, this is hardcore 101. Like when you see the tacks come out, I mean that it's getting serious here. And just the way that Johnson sets up this match, like he's seen a lot of death matches in his day. I can fully appreciate that, just as somebody that's watched a ton of GCW, and you can appreciate the art form for what it is. But I can't stress enough, if you've never seen it, it is an acquired taste, so it might not be for you. GCW only does, I want to stress too, like only 1 or 2 death matches a show, so it's not like they do a whole card, except for certain ones throughout the year. So if you're going to check it out, I always will plug GCW, but this is just something they'll do every now and then on a card, but it's not a full, normal 7 matches on a card. And then we see Coruscant is getting put into the Boston Crab. He's bleeding out. Lola has to make a quick save, and obviously the chains come back into play here. And then she does one of the wildest clotheslines I've seen. And how amazing was this scene? Like, did you jump out of your chair reading this and going like, yes?
Oh man, I was so stoked, because that looks like something straight out of John Wick, like something crazy like that, where she's like using the chain to do the clothesline, and like her whole body, that or any other kung fu thing, because she kind of got the chain wrapped around her, like they catch it and they're like, nope, screw you, and then like put it back right on the other person that they're fighting, and just again the lettering behind the scenes just like amplified that whole thing, and the motion and the way that it's going. It just really, it's just so well done.
Yeah.
That it really just puts you right there in the moment, and realize that, oh, maybe this is the time where the tides have turned. So now it looks like Cobra Sun and Lona actually have a shot here, because, they have them on the ropes, so to speak. And this is when really it goes the other way, where Cobra Sun starts to do some things and does that crazy suplex off the top ropes to the chairs, and what looks like almost breaking the guy's back.
Yeah.
And then he's ready to pin him. But, in the back of my mind, I'm thinking, all right, we're at issue 5. I think there's like only a couple of issues. Like, when is the reveal going to happen when Cobra Sun, like, his mask comes off, or he tells Lona that he's really the father? And in the back of my mind, I was thinking about this during this issue, because I had a feeling it was going to come up either here or real soon, and it was going to be detrimental to something, right? And lo and behold, they go to try to finish it with their move, and all of a sudden, like, the other guy reverses it and starts to kind of rip the mask off, and then Lona sees it, and she's just like, Dad?
Yeah.
And, like, what were you, were you in the same boat as me? Were you like, oh, gut punch, like something bad's gonna happen?
Yeah,
what were you thinking?
I'm the wrestling fan in me kicked in. I'm like, oh crap, they're gonna lose. They're gonna lose. Like, this is gonna happen, because anytime that you see a masked wrestler lose their mask during a match like this, it usually means they're gonna cover up and they're gonna take the pin. And seeing Lona's face just completely drop when she's like, Dad, I'm like, oh damn it, something's gonna happen here. And then sure enough, when she takes the shot on the top rope and falls down, and you see the dad screaming, you just knew it was like, oh man, they're going to lose this. They're somehow going to lose this. And sure enough, when they do, the winner is FYSO. And you just see like that whole panel sequence too, where you see the 3 come down, the gasps from the crowd, and they're all kind of freaking out, like, what do we do? and just how they kind of play it off there. But then it's like the big surprise ending that I don't think any of us saw coming here is they're going to, I mean, yeah, you mean,
not at all.
I mean, you want to take away breaking it down here. I saw this and I was like, wait, what?
See, and as soon, right before I got there, like, I was like, oh crap, Lona is like dead. And then all of a sudden, or beaten brutally, because the dad is just like looking at her with his eyes wide open, like, oh my God, because she's crushed and crippled and just like bloody everywhere. And then it gets into, Maggie and Frank meeting, which are these two guys, and they're talking about two people that they lost. And then another kind of training montage goes in, and they're like, yep, we're going to train harder than anybody else, and we're going to win this thing. And if we win this tournament, we're going to, one of us needs to pick who's bringing the other one back, because we both have loved ones that we want to deal with. And you get some of this in the beginning of this issue where Maggie is like sitting in the hospital bed with, I don't know if it was her brother or her husband. I don't think they really get into it, but the doctor basically comes in is like, we're talking hours, not days. And she just like snuggles with him in the hospital bed, knowing that, the inevitable is going to be coming. But the very end of this thing, it's just like the necromancer guy, he's like, here you go, congratulations. And then the two guys are like we agreed. And he's like, what the hell are you guys doing, holding the two things? And they're both like, to the death. And then it's to be continued. So it's just like, all right, well, that's I don't want to say that's convenient from a storytelling perspective, but it's definitely not something that that we saw coming, or I even saw coming for this, because I thought, we're done. Lona's done. There's got to be some other way, because there's still 2 issues left in this series. Like, how are they going to conclude? And the other thing too is just like, is it really going to happen the way we think it's going to happen? Like, sometimes from a themes perspective, right, they could go a couple ways with this. Like, are the quote unquote good guys going to win and prevail, and everything is going to be, rainbows and butterflies, and she's going to get her mom back? Or is this just going to be a story about loss, that regardless of what you can do, you're, as hard as you can fight, it's not always going to work out the way that you want it to, but it's about persevering in other ways? Is that the theme that he's going for? And we just don't know yet at this point, because it's still up in the air. Like, these guys are going to fight to the death. Technically, the other guys have lost. I know you haven't read the next issue yet, but like, what are your thoughts on where you think it's going for the last 2, and what do you want to see happen as an end result?
Boy, I don't see, like, how I think it ends. I think the FYSO takes themselves out, so there's no tag team champion, so they have to have an immediate interim champion, and I think that's where Sun and Steel come back in. I'm just not sure who they'd be facing. Like, that's the one thing that's kind of throwing me off. But I don't know, because this book has gone in so many different directions. Like, sure, I'd love to see the happy ending, but I don't think we're going to get it. I really don't. And I think it's going to be just about like the father and daughter coming together and coming to terms with what's happened, and finally finding peace between them both. Like, I think that's what happens. Like, they're not going to win it, but they will definitely, or like the necromancer is going to get caught. Like, he never could bring her back in the first place. Like, I think that's where it's ultimately going to play out. But I think at the end result is going to be the father and daughter are back together, and the family that was fractured is now whole again. And I think that'd be the perfect way to end things.
Nice. I don't want to give away too much, but I will say you're thinking in the right direction, because that's kind of what ends up happening. But you do get a little bit more backstory, which I really enjoyed in the beginning of issue 6.
Okay.
And then the ending of issue 6, again, you don't know what's gonna happen, because of the way that it ends, and what has to happen next as far as what goes down with everything. So I don't even know how they're going to wrap it up in one issue, to be honest with you, because it feels like it could span another small arc.
I mean, maybe he's going to, maybe he would do that. Like, I think Daniel Warren Johnson's has this played out so much. Like, there's so many different ways he can go with this. Like, even like I say, I haven't got a chance to read issue 6 yet as we're recording. That is on the list to do this week. So if you hit me up later on social media, I will definitely be on top of this. But I think it's just a matter of, like, there's so many different ways you can play this out. And if he wanted to take a break and, like, come back to it, I don't think that would be a bad thing either. But it's just, like, where exactly is the direction? Like, that's the only thing I don't know.
Yeah. Yeah, and the thing is like, at the end of issue 6, it basically says to be concluded. So I really don't think we're going to get any more than one more issue. So it'll be interesting to see how they wrap it up, like what they decide to go with. Is it going to be a happy ending, or is it going to be, an underlying theme that we were kind of talking about?
Yeah, I'm leaning underlying theme, but I'm going to be there regardless. Like, I wouldn't be mad if it was a happy ending either. I think we've already seen enough go through for this family. Like, they deserve a win somewhere. So if it happens here, I got a feeling Necromancer is going to double cross somewhere somehow. Because it would just be fitting. Like, obviously, I don't buy these on the up and up. Just from the start of this introduction to him in issue 1, and like, there's something a little fishy about him. But that's just me.
Yeah. The only where I could see potentially this going is some underlying thing with the Necromancer and everything else that's going on. Because there is, I agree, something definitely fishy with him that's going on, and you learn some things in issue 6 that causes kind of issue 7 to play, or the beginning of issue 7 to play out when it happens. So it'll definitely be interesting, and I definitely want to see. I want to see some more with that character, because I feel like he's been kind of a secondary character up until this point, only really being the announcer and the hoster, and there's some underlying things I think that are going on that we're going to learn more, potentially they could play into.
Mm-hmm. No, definitely so. But right now, 5 issues in, it's definitely worth the read. Final thoughts on the first 5 issues, and any recommendations moving forward for this, Marty?
Yeah, I mean, it's in my opinion, it's definitely a must read for anybody, wrestling fans or non-wrestling fans. It has a lot of things going on: the art, the colors, the story, like. And the best thing about it is it's super new reader friendly, which is one thing that I always find challenging with characters in general, especially coming from like the big two with DC and Marvel. It's like, all right, I want to learn more about X, but where do I jump in? Mm-hmm. And that's where like the community really helps, like talking to folks on Twitter, talking to you guys, talking to, my pod crew, Bash and Ali, and talking in the Radiant Black Discord, and just the other comic book section, is where do I start? And then it's even like trying to guess, and sometimes that happens. But like, these minis are so great for new readers to jump in to, because it's self-contained, and you don't need any prior knowledge. I mean, I have no wrestling knowledge, and I'm thoroughly enjoying it. I mean, you have the wrestling knowledge that I don't. You get some extra tidbits out of it, so it's not required that you have it, and it's still an enjoyable read. So it's definitely a must read for me. I've already read issue 6. I'm going to be picking up issue 7. Daniel Warren Johnson's awesome. Like, I'll even say, if you like this, I started reading through Murder Falcon because that's been on my list of things to read for a long time now. And that's fully collected. That has a hardcover, I think, that came out recently. I get all my comics digitally just because if I got the physicals, I think my wife would kill me. So I get everything digitally. I read on Comixology, and I have, the DC Ultimate, or whatever that
Infinite Ultra now.
Ultra now,
yeah, I got Ultra,
which I love, and I love it. Marvel's got to do something, because 3 months of waiting kind of stinks. So I got to pick and choose what I buy for there. But
give it time. I got a feeling after the New Year's, I'm just making an unofficial ODPH guess. After New Year's, I would say we'll see something.
Yeah, and I'm happy to pay for it. I mean, I love the content. Makes it easy to, when I travel, I can just take my iPad and I got everything with me, instead of potentially damaging books. But definitely Murder Falcon is amazing. I'm 5 issues into that, and I highly recommend it. It's got like really cool vibes. Again, Daniel Warren Johnson, he plays with themes. He's a triple threat. He's doing more on that than he did on this. He's doing the art and the lettering and some of the colors in some cases. And it's just a fun time, metal, and they're dealing with underlying themes of loss and cancer in that case, where the main characters goes through that. And it's, I was a part of a jam band back in the day when, back in high school, me and my buddies jammed out. I played drums, and and a couple of my buddies played guitar, and we just, jammed out in my basement. So I had a lot of those vibes come into play with reading with reading through that. But it's just fun. And again, it's self-contained. It's something that anybody can pick up if they're new to comics or want to get into it. So I highly recommend that, especially if they like this book and haven't read it yet.
Absolutely. Well, Marty, thank you for coming on the show. We definitely got to have you swing back sooner than later, so definitely talk some more with us. Why don't you tell everybody where to find you on social media so they can definitely connect, and definitely make sure they're following Panel to Panel.
Yeah, absolutely. Really appreciate you having me on. Be happy to come on again. This was a blast. On Twitter, you can follow the podcast at Panel2Panel Pod. I'm at Marty Stoked, and I'm close to 1K followers, and I'm going to be doing a giveaway for folks that are following along, so be on the lookout for that. I do comic giveaways from time to time, so at 1K I'll be doing one there. If you're on the Instagram, we're at Panel2Panel Podcast, and we're not quite on as many major platforms like the 150 bazillion that ODPH is on, but we're getting there. So if you follow along, you should be able to find us on all major platforms on at Panel2Panel Podcast.
Absolutely. So make sure you do that. Follow him. And if you need anything from the ODPH, it's very simple, ODPHpodcast.com. Thank you, as always, for listening to this special edition of the ODPH. We'll see you next time.
The darkness has crept up to cover your face, sliding backwards in disguise, and nothing collapses into place. So we try to keep our heads above the water, but it gets so hard to breathe out here. Always falling backward, never find our feet. What the hell are we doing? Empty cars on empty streets, running static, bouncing around and around and around and around and out defeat. So we say, outside, where the last been broken voices in the sky. Drowning our voices, 'cause that's all the sound, lost and forever, waiting to be found. We're up in the clouds and there's no coming down. We're lost in the crowd, there's no one around. The racket boys are calling, chicken man looks thin, hiding in the rafters, swallowing the sin. A little deviation from the little task at hand.